Horizontal equity implies that we give the same treatment to people in an identical situation. Example, if two people earn 15,000 pounds, they should both pay the same amount of income tax. Therefore, horizontal equity makes sure we don't have discrimination on the grounds such as race, gender, different types of work. Vertical equity implies that people with higher incomes should pay more tax. Vertical equity seeks to tax in a proportional or progressive way. People with more ability to pay should pay more tax. Vertical equity is important for redistributing income within society. Horizontal equity is an important starting point for any tax system. Horizontal equity can be consistent with also achieving vertical equity. Horizontal equity is the equal treatment of equals, and this is a means for achieving a distribution of tax burdens that is vertically equitable.
Flat taxes versus regressive and progressive taxes. While flat taxes impose the same tax percentage on all individual regardless of income, a regressive tax high income earners at a lower percentage of their income and low wage income at the higher percentage of their income. A sale tax is an example of a regressive tax, although at the first glance it may appear to be a flat tax. For example, imagine two people each buy $100 worth of t-shirt and pay a 7% tax. Although a tax rate is the same, and the individual with the lower income pays more his wage toward the tax than the person with the higher income, making sales tax regressive. Progressive tax rates, in contrast, constitute a large percentage of high-wage earner incomes and a lower percentage of wage earners' incomes. In the United States, income tax progressive. To illustrate, as of 2016, individuals earn up to $9,275 in taxable income pays 10% in tax, while those earner over 415 and 50,000 pays up to 39.6 on their earnings.
Our tax system is awful. The tax code, this is part of it, is unreadable. This is a third of it. And this is just the beginning. The regulations that go on to explain these 3 books total 75,000 pages. Now, some taxes are necessary. There is a cost to government, and we need to pay for that somehow. But it's outrageous that we have to spend endless hours figuring out what we owe. And the taxes are so complex. Most Americans now pay someone for help. And it's outrageous that this is filled with special breaks for certain politically connected people. And those breaks make our economy less healthy and less fair. We should just throw out the whole tax code and start over with something simpler, something understandable. Steve Forbes has tirelessly pushed that idea for years. And you failed miserably.
We're still trying to persuade, John, and every April 15th we get more support. And I think in the 2016 elections it's going to be out at the forefront. There's a growing consensus. I think it'll be on the table in 2017 in a way that hasn't been for almost 30 years.
What makes you say you're getting more support?
Even Democrats now realize this code is indefensible. Even on the Simpson-Bowles Commission, they bought on the idea if you declutter the code, you can cut tax rates across the board. There's no group in America, other than maybe lobbyists, who defend this code.
Not even tax accountants? All right, but simpler I get. But why flat? Flat means that everybody pays after a certain point. Poor people don't pay income tax, but then everybody pays the same. But that's not the most complex part of the code.
Well, if you have more than one tax rate, then you open it up for politicians to clutter the code again. After 1986, where they made a stab at simplification, 2 tax rates, 15 and 28%. 4 years later, there's a third rate. Bill Clinton added 2 more, and we're off to the races. And we have had 14,000 changes since 1986. And so with a single rate, everyone knows if you're doing something. Today, you can make a change in the code. 6 months later, people may discover what actually happened.
Now, you say if we had a flat tax, this would help charitable giving, but I would lose the deduction for charitable giving. So how would that help?
Because Americans, one, don't need to be bribed to give, and history shows that when Americans have more, they give more. Charitable giving in terms of dollars, not in terms of hours volunteered, roughly 2% of GDP, been that way even before we had the income tax. In the 1980s, when the top rate got cut from 70% down to 28%, charitable institutions, especially colleges, went berserk. But what happened was, not only did charitable giving go up, but the rate of growth went up. When people have more in this country, they give more.
So even though people say, oh, I get a deduction for this, I'm going to give to charity and I take my deduction, they give anyway without it.
Sure they do. It's been that way. Go back to the 19th century. We've always been doing this.
You say it would encourage home ownership. Not that I'm certain that's good, but the real estate lobby is wedded to these mortgage deductions because they say that encourages home ownership. You get rid of that, it'll hurt home ownership.
Well, if you have real lobbyists in Washington, they have to have a rationale. But the fact of the matter is, again, when people have more, they will buy a house. They don't need to be bribed by the government to do it. And we've had growing home ownership in this country for a long time. When you try to stimulate home ownership artificially, you get the kind of disaster we had several years ago.
In your ideal world, with the flat tax, it would be on a postcard. You could just fill out one postcard?
One sheet of paper, postcard, or a few keystrokes if you're onto your PC.
And a couple countries,
or Apple.
a couple countries have this. Estonia has a flat tax of 21%. So the form is 1 page long, takes 5 minutes to complete. But Estonia is a new country.
Over 30 countries around the world. Vladimir Putin, who peaked early, put this in a 13% rate back in 2000 when Russia had a tax code that made ours look simple. And within a couple of years, revenues doubled. Hong Kong's had a variation for 60 years. One of the most prosperous pieces of real estate on earth, even though it was dirt poor 60 years ago, now booming.
You're fighting history pushing this. The first 1040...
Americans' existence was fighting history. We are the only invented nation on earth, so it's part of our tradition to fight what everyone else does.
But I look at how this stuff, I threw one, there are more to come, how it's grown. When the first 1040, 4 pages, including the instructions. Today it's 176 pages. The tax rate, 1% in today's dollars if you made $500,000, 6% if you made $11 million. We've come a long way.
It went berserk almost from the beginning because of the First World War. And even after 2 world wars, politicians have discovered an income tax is a money machine. They're not going to give it up easily. And so let's go and have a simplified code. That would be a huge step in the right direction. Half the lobbying in Washington revolves around this beast. And let's kill it and start all over again.
What is a progressive tax? A progressive tax is a tax that makes larger percentage from high-income earners that is that from low-income individuals. The U.S. income tax system is considered progressive. In 2016, individuals who have under 9,275 of taxable income pay 10% in income tax, while taxpayers earn more than benchmark cutoff of $415,050 fall in tax bracket with rate of 39.6%. Different between progressive tax and flat tax. Unlike progressive and regressive tax system, A flat tax system does not impose different tax rates of people without different income level. Instead, flat taxation imposes the same percentage tax on everyone, regardless of income. For example, if everyone is taxed at 10% regardless of income, this is a flat tax. The U.S. payroll tax is often considered a flat tax because it taxes all wage earned at the same percentage. However, as of 2016, this tax is not applied of earning over $118,500, and the result is it is only a flat tax for people earning under the amount. Taxpayer earn over that amount pay a lower percentage of their total income. In payroll, tax make a tax regressive.
Once upon a time, there were 3 brothers, triplets, named Tom, Dick, and Harry Class. They were raised in the same home with the same parents, had the same IQ, same skills, and same opportunities. Each was married and had 2 children. They were all carpenters making $25 per hour. While they were very similar in all these respects, they had different priorities. For example, Tom chose to work 20 hours per week, while his brother Dick worked 40 hours, and Harry 60. It should also be noted that Harry's wife worked full-time as an office manager for a salary of $50,000. Dick's wife sold real estate part-time 10 hours a week and made $25,000 per year. Tom's wife did not work. Tom and Dick spent all of their family income. Since they paid into Social Security, they figured they didn't need to save for retirement. Harry and his wife, on the other hand, had, over many years, put away money each month and invested it in stocks and bonds. Here's how it worked out. Tom made $25,000 a year. Dick and his wife made $75,000, and Harry and his wife $150,000. When a new housing development opened up in their community, the brothers decided to buy equally priced homes on the same private street. One day, the brothers decided to pool their funds for the purpose of improving their street. Concerned about crime and safety, and wanting a more attractive setting for their homes, the 3 families decided to install a security gate at the street's entrance, repave the street's surface, and enhance the lighting and landscaping. The work was done for a total cost of $30,000. Harry assumed they would divide the bill 3 ways, each brother paying $10,000. But Tom and Dick objected. "Why should we pay the same as you?" they said. "You make much more money than we do." Harry was puzzled. "What does that have to do with anything?" he asked. "My family makes more money because my wife and I work long hours and because we have saved some of the money we've earned to make additional money from investments. Why should we be penalized for that?" "Harry, you can work and save all you like," Tom countered. "But my wife and I want to enjoy ourselves now, not 25 years from now." "Fine, Tom, do what you want. It's a free country. But why should I have to pay for that?" "I can't believe you're being so unbrotherly," Tom argued. "You have a lot of money and I don't. I thought you'd be more generous." At this point, Dick, the peacemaker in the family, entered the conversation. "I've got an idea," Dick said. "Our combined income is $250,000, and $30,000 is 12% of that amount. Why don't we each pay that percentage of our income? Under that formula, Tom would pay $3,000, I would pay $9,000, and Harry would pay $18,000. "I have a much better idea," said Tom, "and one that's fairer than what you're proposing." Dick and Harry turned to Tom. "Harry should pay $23,450. Dick, you should pay $6,550. And I will pay nothing." To Dick, this sounded completely arbitrary and not really fair, but it did have one big plus. His share would be $2,450 less under Tom's formula than under his own. So he decided to be silent. Harry, however, was stunned. You want me to pay almost 80% of the bill despite the fact that each of us is receiving the exact same benefits? Where did you get such a crazy idea? From no less an authority than the U.S. government, Tom responded as he pulled out a gray booklet. It's all right here in the IRS tax tables. This is the progressive income tax system all U.S. taxpayers live under, and I don't see why we should be any different. In fact, I believe all future improvements should be paid in this way. Works for me, said Dick. So, by a vote of 2-1, the cost of the street improvements was divided as Tom had proposed, even though they benefited equally, and even though the reason Harry had more money was that he and his wife had worked many more hours than his brothers and their wives, and had saved some of what they had earned, instead of spending it all. Tom and Dick lived happily ever after with their new arrangement. Harry grumbled a lot, but whenever he complained, his brothers called him greedy and selfish. The end.
Does tax work, or what is the importance of tax?
Kasi di ba, yung gobyerno kailangan ng pondo yan. So hindi naman siya makakakuha ng pondo kahit saan-saan lang. So kailangan ng tax. Yun yung ginagamit para sa general purpose, kumari, mga hospital, public school, basta mga gano'n, police.
What is the difference between progressive tax and flat tax?
Mahal-mahal. Kasi yung pagkakatanda ko, pag progressive, pag tumataas yung income ng isang tao, tumataas din yung tax niya kasi percentage yun yung ginagamit yan. Pag regressive, pag mababa yung income, mababa rin yung tax.
How does tax work, or what is the importance of tax?
The importance of tax to the government is it is being used for the government's project in terms of education, infrastructures, and other things.
What is the difference between progressive tax and flat tax?
Progressive tax, these are the tax that changes in different values. Example, it is being used in computing net income tax because every time that the net income rises, tax rate also rises.
Effective tax rate versus marginal tax rate. The marginal tax rate refers to the bracket into a business or individual income falls. The effective tax rate is typically a more accurate representation of tax liability than an individual or business marginal tax rate. For example, two companies with income business with income in the same upper marginal tax bracket and may end up with different effective tax rates depending on the amount of their earning that falls into each tax bracket.
Let's discuss an important concept from economics, the Laffer curve. This concept is named after the man who developed it, Arthur Laffer, a major American economist who has taught at the University of Chicago, University of Southern California, and elsewhere. The Laffer curve illustrates the two most important things we need to know about taxes: how much money the government can raise from taxes, and at what level of taxation the government might start getting less, not more revenue. The Laffer curve is illustrated here by a two-dimensional graph. The horizontal line is the tax rate that the government chooses, and the vertical line is the revenue that the government receives from that tax rate. First, because 0 times any number is 0, if the tax rate is 0, then the government receives zero revenue. Accordingly, 0 is our first point on the curve. Now suppose the government chooses a very small tax rate, say 1%. The government will then begin to receive some revenue from citizens. This means that another point in the curve must be something like this. Now suppose the government charges a 2% tax rate. Then everyone would agree that it will receive even more revenue, which means that another point in the curve must be something like this. And if the government keeps raising the rate, then revenue will continue to go up, at least when we're in the low tax rate part of the graph. This means that if we fill in the curve, it has an upward slope, at least when we're in the low tax rate part of the graph. Now suppose the government charges a 100% tax rate. If this happens, then no one would work. That is, why would anyone work when the government is going to take all the money that they make? And if no one works, then national income would be zero. This means that government revenue would be 100% of zero, or zero. This means that another point of the curve must be here. Now, let's complete the curve. When we do, we see that the curve must have a hump. That is, it could look like this, or this, or this. But it has to have a hump. This is simply because the revenue line has to go up in the low tax rate part of the graph, and it has to start going down to reach the point we drew at the 100% tax rate. But if the curve slopes downward, it implies something remarkable, something that few of those who push for higher and higher taxes want to admit. It means that when tax rates are high, if you make them higher, you'll actually bring in less revenue to the government. This has in fact occurred in practice. For instance, during the Great Depression, when Congress passed the Hawley-Smoot tariff bill, although the bill raised taxes on imported goods, the revenue that came from those taxes actually decreased. A more recent example occurred in the early 1980s. After President Reagan and Congress drastically reduced the tax rates on the rich, the tax revenue that came from the rich actually increased. All economists, even the most left-wing ones, agree that the true Laffer curve, the one that reflects real life, has a hump. Now, therefore, the curve has a downward sloping part, meaning at some point, tax revenues start going down when you increase rates. So where then do economists disagree? They disagree about exactly where the hump occurs. When I took my first economics class in 1984 at Stanford University, the textbook said that the hump occurs somewhere around the 70% tax rate. But apparently, I was taught something wrong. New evidence from an unexpected source suggests that the hump occurs at a much lower tax rate, something around 33%. That source is a study by Christina Romer and her husband David Romer. Both are economics professors at the University of California, Berkeley. Christina Romer was the chairman of President Barack Obama's Council of Economic Advisors. In other words, the study was written by one of the most influential liberal economists in the United States, and it was published in the American Economic Review, the most widely respected economics journal in the world. The study examined how national income responds to tax rates. But as far as what concerns us here, the key point is that if you do the math, the results imply that the hump on the Laffer curve occurs where the tax rate is around 33%, much lower than economists previously thought. Let's now put these findings into political terms. They suggest that no matter what your politics, you should not want tax rates to be above 33%. Obviously, conservatives and many moderates think rates should be lower than that. But even if you are an extreme left-winger and your only goal is to make government as big as possible, you should still oppose a tax rate higher than 33%. The reason is that, as the Romer and Romer study suggests, when tax rates go higher than that, the government actually gets less money. Everyone of every political persuasion should pay attention to the Romer and Romer study and its important implications. They suggest that if we decrease tax rates, government revenues might actually rise. I'm Tim Grosclose, professor of political science and economics at UCLA for Prager University.